Hello everyone. Today we have reached the point where it's time to talk about what might be the best compact camera ever made. We're going to talk about the Fujifilm X30. And I'm a little bit sad to do this review because every time I'm done with a review, it generally means that I'm going to use that specific item a little bit less. And I'm truly enjoying using this camera. Before we dig deeper into my somewhat bold statement about this being the best compact camera ever created, we need to define what a compact camera actually is and what it isn't. This is a Fujifilm X100 series cameras. And while it's compact in size, it's not a compact camera. This, however, is a Fujifilm F50, and it's a compact camera. While being much smaller than the X30, they both are compact cameras. A compact camera is a kind of forgotten category of cameras that was popular before the time of smartphones. Do you remember those good old days? Personally, I kind of miss those days, and I sometimes wish that smartphone photography wasn't a thing. But anyway, these two cameras both host a relatively small sensor, but the main difference is that the X30 is tailored towards a photographer who wants a compact camera that has everything that the larger counterpart have. The Fujifilm X30 handles just like a large camera. It has all the dials and the bells and whistles. It has a mode switch on the top, manual zoom, that when you twist it, it zooms. So there's no electronic moving of the zoom, which is nice, considering that it adds a layer of efficiency when you're using it. Many of the compact cameras comes with an electronic zoom, where you have a dial or a tiny little switch on the camera that moves the zoom. This is somewhat slow and not so efficient. And it also takes away some of the tactile feeling that you will get on a larger camera. I previously made a review of the older generation, the predecessor to this camera, the Fujifilm X30. I recommend you to watch that video, as it will add some context to this series of cameras, since they are very similar. You can find a link in the description to that review. These cameras, though, in terms of image quality, are more or less identical. They share the same sensor and even the same processor. But the X30 got some updated features, one of which is the electronic viewfinder. Some might argue and say that the optical viewfinder is nicer, but keep in mind that the X10 and the X20 have some long-term reliability issues with the optical viewfinder, so in this case, the electronic one is an upgrade. When it comes to handling, the X30 comes with a slightly better grip and more customization functionality, allowing you to customize almost every button. And it also got Wi-Fi. Additionally, it comes with a tilt screen. So you can generalize and say that the X30 is more of a modern camera with modern features that you would see on an up-to-date camera today. Otherwise, the lens is the same, and I felt like the image quality and the focus performance are similar both on the X30 and X20. But personally, I enjoy using the X30 much more. It handles much better as an everyday shooter than what the X20 did, even if they are similar. And that comes down to features like the customization, being able to customize it more how I want it, and also how it handles recipes and film simulations with 7 custom modes, like what we are used to on the more up-to-date Fujifilm cameras. Another thing that is greatly enhanced is the battery time. This camera shares the same battery as you would find in early X100 series models up to X100T. It's the MP95 battery. When it's not very large, it actually gives you good battery time in a camera like this. The battery time is also greatly enhanced if you regularly turn off your camera or if you have auto power off. Personally, I have auto power off set to 2 minutes on this camera. When I started to use the X30 though, I initially was a little bit disappointed because my mind was set to what I could expect from a larger sensor camera. But I quickly adjusted to the smaller sensor and I started to see the interesting aspects of a camera like this. So, picking up the X30, I kind of already knew what to expect. And I can tell you, I strongly enjoy using this camera. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that all the images it produces are amazing, because they aren't. It is kind of a hit or miss, primarily when it comes to technical image quality. There's almost no in between. With the larger sensor camera, some images that aren't very great can still turn out somewhat good. With a camera like this, or like the X30, it's really hit or miss. So when you get it right, the images looks great and the quality is great, especially in good lighting conditions. But when the conditions starts to get more demanding, such as high dynamic range scenes or low light environments, the image quality takes a hit and it doesn't really look so good. It has that typical compact camera look, with all the limitations that you get from a small sensor camera. This camera has a small sensor and it's not really a large, small sensor either. Did you got that? But it is an X-Trans sensor. More specifically, it's built on the X-Trans 2 sensor technology. The noise pattern has that irregular look that you get from an X-Trans sensor, which somewhat resembles grain more than noise, which is nice. This means that you can push this camera to higher ISO level than you would normally do on a camera of this type. However, I'm not particularly picky when it comes to high ISO and noise levels, especially not with Fujifilm cameras, because the noise looks quite good. I'm also a Capture One user, and Capture One does wonders for RAW files from Fujifilm cameras, making them look really great. So I never had any real issues going up to ISO 3200, which is the maximum on this camera, in situations where I needed it. But it should be noted that when you push this camera above ISO 1000, the image quality starts to take a hit. So the question is, who is this camera for? Well, it is for those who appreciate the compact size and don't want to be limited to a fixed focal length, since it has a zoom range from 28 to 112 millimeters with built-in image stabilization in the lens. The lens has a variable aperture, which could be a drawback, but that aperture ranges from f2 to 2.8, which is good. It's much better than what you could see on similar cameras. So if you don't want to be bothered by the variable aperture, you can set it to 2.8 and forget about it. Personally, I use this camera in aperture priority mode most of the time together with auto ISO, and I use the exposure compensation dial on the top to make my image either darker or brighter. So I'm not really bothered by the variable aperture. This is a camera that I truly enjoyed using, and it's opened up new possibilities for me. A lot of people would complain about the smaller sensor and saying that they lack that bokeh, which is kind of true unless you get really close to your subject. But for most everyday situations, you're not going to have a narrow depth of field, and you're going to struggle a bit if you want to create those blurry backgrounds. However, instead of seeing this as a bad thing, embrace it and see the good aspect of it. This makes this camera an excellent choice for certain type of street photography, for example. I did a lot of street photography using zone focus, setting the aperture at f8 or f11. Because of that, I have a depth of field that goes from roughly about 1 meter almost to infinity, allowing me to capture images that I would never get otherwise. Being small and featuring a tilt screen, you could use this camera very stealthily. You can also put the camera into a situation where you can't physically go, but where your hand can reach out and extending the reach of your camera and finding new interesting angles. This is especially useful in combination with zone focus, where you never really have to think about the camera's autofocus performance. While talking about autofocus, let's move forward to autofocus. Well, the autofocus on this camera is okay. It's an old camera, but it comes with both contrast and phase detection, and it's good enough, so to say. It's not the fastest, and the continuous AF performance is going to struggle a little bit sometimes. But then again, we have a depth of field that is pretty wide, so it's not really a big issue because you're almost never in a situation where the field of view is critically narrow. So, could this be the perfect everyday carry camera? Well, the answer is yes and maybe no. It depends on the user and their preferences. Personally, I've been using this as an everyday carry for quite a while, and it has made me photograph images that I would never have taken otherwise. It had made me capture more every life moments. Perhaps if you have been watching my previous reviews and seen my images, you might have noticed that the images from the X30 in this review have a different style, and the subjects are a little bit different from what I normally do. It simply comes down to embracing the strength of the tool that you have. I always carry around a camera, but this one, being so small, sleek, and having that zoom lens, opens up for new perspectives and possibilities for me. I take a step back and I don't take photography as seriously as I would normally do, which is something I like. I previously mentioned in the X20 review that I don't like photographing people with this camera, referring to portraits and half-body shots and how they feel compared to a larger sensor camera. I kind of still stand by those words, but a lot of the images you have seen in this review are of people and portraits. But when I embraced what this camera is and what it isn't, I become more at peace with the look. It's a camera with a small sensor, so I have to abandon the thought of creating images that have the large sensor look. Because of this camera being what it is, I actually think having a zoom lens is quite nice, and that comes from a hardcore prime shooter. But this camera is a little bit different. It has a mechanical zoom. All this makes the Fujifilm X30 a camera that is a joy to use. One that has the ability to create amazing images, though every camera has that ability. It comes down to the user. But for me, this has been a camera that I truly enjoyed, and a camera that I think is a keeper. And what about that bold claim in the beginning? I still stand by it. This is the best compact camera ever created. And it almost feels sad that this review period with the X30 is coming to an end. Anyway, if you like this kind of content and you want to see more camera related content, consider subscribing to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. Remember, it's not just about the camera you have, but the stories you tell and the moments you capture. Until next time, keep exploring and documenting the world around you. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.